Pong was the first video game. This is a myth that you'll hear repeated often. Usually it's by older folks who are around and they remember the game being big, but a lot of times it's by the younger generation, who's mostly just heard it from the old folks. People that tend to be more actively into the hobby don't believe this, but it's still a prevalent myth all the same. And hey, this is the first episode of MythMushers, so I figured we'd tackle one of the oldest gaming myths possible. What's up, nerds? This is going to be a great time and a great video series going forward. Let's jump into it.
For clarity, Pong is an incredibly important video game. It's certainly among the first video games ever made, but the first it most certainly was not. Pong isn't even the first video game produced by Nolan Bushnell, Atari's founder. That honor goes to the little-known Computer Space, which was the first arcade video game cabinet. Computer Space was derivative of the 1962 computer game Space War, which was originally developed by Steve Russell and iteratively altered within the small programming community developing at that time. Bushnell adapted the game into a working arcade machine with Ted Dabney, with whom he would soon after found Atari Inc., nearly a decade later in 1971. They did this under their first company, Syzygy Engineering, for arcade manufacturer Nutting Associates. The game did not do well. It was too complicated for drunk people in bars where arcade machines were typically distributed. In the grand scheme of things, Space War was incredibly important and influential, being one of the first things anyone can reasonably call a video game. Computer Space, however, means little. It was only important as a failure that Bushnell had to learn from. Pong wasn't even the first ping-pong style game. For all its noteworthiness, it wasn't even an original idea. One of the first games that resembled a video game was called Tennis for Two, a computer game displayed on an oscilloscope screen developed by William Higginbotham. An American physicist at Brookhaven National Laboratory, Higginbotham created the game to show at the laboratory's public exhibition in 1958. In 1966, Ralph Baer, an engineer working for Sanders Associates, convinced his superiors at what was primarily a military contractor to allow him to develop interactive games that could be played on standard televisions. The result of this was a prototype called the Brown Box, which Baer was eventually able to license to Magnavox, who would produce and market the product as the Magnavox Odyssey in early 1972. The Odyssey included many games that revolved around two paddles volleying a dot back and forth, including tennis and table tennis. There wasn't much of a difference. Pong was released 6 months after the Magnavox Odyssey. As the story goes, Nolan Bushnell tasked his newly hired electrical engineer, Al Alcorn, with developing a simple table tennis game as a warm-up to help him get acquainted with the particulars of game development. Alcorn found the initial conception of the game to be too boring and added the mechanics of increasing ball speed and angled shots of his own volition. It was widely believed that Bushnell had seen the Magnavox product before assigning the job to Alcorn. Bushnell denied this for a while before eventually admitting to it. Magnavox sued Atari. The suit was settled out of court, with Atari agreeing to pay Magnavox a licensing fee. This ultimately didn't slow Atari at all. Pong may not have been the first arcade video game, but it was the first big success. It eventually created the arcade video game market and skyrocketed Atari to unprecedented success, with Atari becoming the fastest growing company in American history up to that point.
Thanks for watching the video, guys. You might have noticed that I didn't really tackle what was the first video game. Honestly, that is a much harder question to answer than you would think. It all depends on your definition. I'll link you down below to an Ahoy documentary. It's about an hour long and it's incredibly well researched, and I think they answer the question much better than I could. So check that out. Also, if you want to subscribe, we'll be doing more of these. I don't know how regularly. I'm not making any promises here, but I've got plenty other myths lined up that I would like to go through with you. So rate, review, subscribe. Let us know down in the comments below what you think of this video. Let us know what other kind of videos you'd like to see like this. If you have any suggestions, I'm open to them because I've only got about 5 things on the dock now. So any other suggestions for me to dive into on MythMushers is greatly appreciated. So, as we always say at the end of these videos, this myth has been mushed.
Mushed.